Hello and welcome to Sound Like, and in today's video we're going to be taking another look at Supermassive Black Hole. For the demonstrations in this video I'll be using my MA-XY pad mountain because it has both the Sustainiac pickup and the MIDI controller XY pad on it as well. I'll be using it to control a Kaoss Pad for that more live accurate type approach. In terms of amp settings, I'd say you want a balance between bass and treble with a bit of a push in the mid control. So with all that set up, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, hit the bell, and let's get started. For the riff tone, this will cover every time it's played throughout the entire song. From the characteristic in the studio version, the tone sticks out quite a lot, making the guitar the main focus of this song. So to follow suit, you're going to want to get a tone that sticks out just as well. And how I achieve this is by splitting my guitar signal and putting one drive on each channel, those drives being my brown acid and my DS1. For this demonstration, I'm talking about the pedals that I have and am therefore using, but I would suggest to you that you take a step back and just look at the broad sounds that I'm using. Fuzzes, distortions and overdrives and whammies and delays and so on. Don't get brand specific, just think about those broad tones. So when I say my MXR brown acid, I'm just saying a heavy fuzz tone. And when I say my DS1, look for a strong distortion sound that you can create with the pedals that you have. Or if you're looking for research, it's just a good starting point. Layering these two heavily contrasting sounds achieves that very saturated sound that I'm looking for that will fill out the mix. Having a stereo pedal board allows me to put one drive on each channel. So with what I have that low intense grit from the fuzz pedal with that clear precision from the distortion. If your pedal board can go stereo, I would suggest that you make the same approach. Push the drives as much as you can, or at least find a balance between the two that sounds good enough to you. If you only have a mono board, then there's nothing stopping you from stacking these drives. It's just up to you which order you want. Do you want a fuzzy distortion or do you want a distorted fuzz tone? It's completely up to you, and my suggestion would just be to experiment with it. The demonstration that I'll be showing just now is in my stereo setup, so one drive on each channel, and this is what it sounds like. The verse sound is totally different from the riff tone. To my ear, I hear a simply overdriven guitar with a lot of gain behind it. So to achieve this sound, I use my Boss OS2 with the overdrive or distortion control fully over on overdrive and the drive at 3 o'clock. The broad sound is very simple, so it should be achievable by any guitarist, as the main drives are either distortion or overdrive. Overdrive is pretty common, so therefore I do think it is pretty simple to get. In the studio version of the song, the guitar here is arguably just following and supporting the rhythm. However, the sound it's got is still pushing it out there, so it does still capture quite a lot of attention. So you do want to kind of think about where you want your EQing to be. As I said in the intro, pushing the mids on your amp is the way to go. Broadly, this is where the guitar operates most, so focusing on those frequencies is going to really help to push out your guitar tone. Sticking with the studio version of the song at this point, the instrumentation is very minimal. There's no bass, there are vocals, and there's some drums, maybe with some synths underneath it as well. So the mix is still relatively quite open, so anything you put in there is going to stand out, and therefore gives you the opportunity to really find a guitar tone that you like. Speaking of that, this is what mine sounds like. The chorus sound here is exactly the same in terms of drives as the riff tone. All I'm doing is adding my whammy pedal to my brown acid. The whammy is set to a harmony octave down, which further emphasizes that low end grit produced by the fuzz. Keeping it away from the distortion helps to preserve its clear, precise clarity. So what you get in combining it is an emphasis on the low end grit with the extra octave below, but you've still got all the clarity from the distortion. I don't think this or anything like it is done in the studio version of the song. I would argue that it sounds a little little bit more like a live interpretation of the song, or just using it to kind of recreate a synth type sound in conjunction with the guitar. As the distortion sound isn't being affected by the whammy, it's still clearly a distortion tone. But with the harmony octave down, emphasizing that fuzz channel, it does sound a little bit more out there and abstract. So you can argue that it does try to recreate a synth type sound. If you can do this, if you have an octave effect on your board, or you're thinking about getting one, I would argue that it would work really well for this sound. Obviously, in a stereo pedal board, it works out really well to have two different drives operated in two different ways. If you have a mono board, it's a little bit more open to interpretation how you want to do it. You could just keep with the riff type sound that you've got, with either stacking distortion on a fuzz or vice versa, or whatever setup you've got. If you can, I would suggest to play around with an octave effect just to push that sound even further. I'm a big fan of having each section of a song having its own sonic identity, and adding an octave pedal really helps to emphasize that and push that idea further. Any changes to your guitar signal throughout the entire song are going to make it stand out, and more importantly, just make it fun for you to play. This is just my suggestion to at least give you an idea of where to start with creating your own tone. With all that in mind, this is what mine sounds like. The solo to Supermassive Black Hole is very abstract and open to interpretation, especially when you compare it to the studio version and the live versions that have been played throughout the years. And so arguably there are a bunch of ways that you can approach this song in terms of what sound you want to create for it, and also what you're going to be playing into the guitar. Analysing the studio version of the song reveals that it's a simple overdriven guitar with some delay and potentially some sort of volume swells or a volume control in there as well. If you want to recreate this, I'd suggest to take your verse sound and simply just add some delay on top of it. And to go a little bit further on top of that, if you have a guitar with a Sustainiac pickup, you might want to use that as well to get a little bit more abstract and open to interpretation there. If you want to achieve a more live accurate sound, you're going to need a Kaoss Pad. It's the device used by Matt Bellamy for the solo for Supermassive Black Hole, and no other device or plugin or sound or pedal can recreate sounds quite like it. Normally when I talk about pedals, I am a bit more open to interpretation in terms of the types of pedals that you're going to be using. As I said earlier, I'm talking about the pedals in this demonstration that I've got. You may not necessarily have the same pedals I do, but if you want to recreate that live type sound, you're really going to need a Korg Kaoss Pad. Sadly, they are no longer in production, and the only way you can get hold of them is by second-hand sites like Reverb. So obviously that's going to present a bit of a barrier for engagement in terms of getting a live accurate type sound. As I did say, there are many ways that you can play this sound, both in terms of what you're playing on the guitar and the sounds that you're getting out of it. If you're lucky enough to have a Kaoss Pad and you want to get that live accurate type sound, you're going to need either preset 75 or 68. If you are going to be using a Kaoss Pad, I would suggest to use this first in your signal chain so that it can be affected by your drives. The sounds on the Kaoss Pad on their own are pretty weak and therefore need a lot of boost, and so taking any of the drives that you find suitable for this song, putting behind the pad so that you can affect the Korg Kaoss Pad with your distortion is the way to go. Anything further beyond that, I would suggest to leave up to your own interpretation. This part of the song is already abstract and really anything goes. All I would suggest is just to have a drive that's really going to be punchy and can keep up. The third sound that I'm going to be talking about here is the one that I like to use the most because it's relatively simple and it's accessible. The structure for this is taking the whammy pedal set to an octave up and a drive pedal, either my OS2 or my DS1. The broad strokes being either a distortion or an overdrive type tone. If you're going to be going down this route, it's completely up to you which one you go for. You've already been using these pedals earlier on in the song, so therefore they have the right kind of gain and push behind them. To focus on the whammy here for a moment, in the chorus I'd said to use a harmony octave down, and what I've done here for the solo is switch to an octave up. The Boss ES8, which is what I use as my looper switcher, can send MIDI signals, and my whammy pedal can receive MIDI signals, so I can switch between presets on the whammy pedal easily with the switch of a patch. range. I know that this type of capability is not open or accessible to everyone, so you're going to have to make a decision between the chorus sound or the solo sound if you're stuck in that kind of bind. The advantage that you've got is that you can experiment with these sounds in your own time. I appreciate that not everyone's going to like my approach for the chorus in terms of using the whammy pedal a harmony octave down on the fuzz, so if you are like that, then you've got the whammy pedal opened up for the octave up approach for the solo. Or if you do like both approaches, then you do have a decision to make. However, I would suggest if you do like both sounds, you could go for the approach of getting an octave pedal for the chorus, freeing you up to use the whammy pedal for this solo effect here. In this tutorial, the pedals and the sounds that I'm describing are not an exhaustive list, they're just based off the pedals that I have and use to recreate sounds. And I would always suggest for you to use your own time to do research on the sounds that you want to explore further. Like I said earlier, the pedals that I'm using are just the ones that I have, and I would suggest for you to focus on the broad types of sounds that I'm using. There's plenty of pedals out there, the vast majority of which I'll never get my hands on, so just get out there and do your own research to find something that you like. So with all that said and done, these are the 3 sounds that you can use for Supermassive Black Hole solo. So there we go, that was Sound Like Supermassive Black Hole. I do hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. Do let me know what you thought about it down in the comments below, and while you're there, let me know what you'd like me to do on a future Sound Like video. I have to say that I'm really enjoying going back and redoing a lot of these Sound Like videos, because since then I've obviously changed my sound up a lot and really expanded my capabilities, and also my video editing techniques as well. It just gives me an excuse to have better production value. So I have to admit there's a little bit of indulgence on my part, but I do hope you find these videos useful and informative. So let me know what you thought about them, and I'll see you in the next one.